Welcome back to Daybreak. It is now 4 minutes past 7. We're in the second hour of the show. We were having a discussion before the discussion during the break, literally, and a lot came out. What I wanted to kind of talk about, but I think let's go into this issue of why it does not translate. And we're talking about how this crop of leaders who are currently in the political space, a lot older than, the youth population that exists. And Ruth, you were saying during the break, these guys will be phasing out around the same time, which is going to create a vacuum, a leadership vacuum. Eric, you talked about the lack of mentorship that creates this very vacuum that we are going to see in a couple of years. But how do we deal with this issue? And let me come to you, Eric, in terms of engaging the next crop of leaders. Just a few minutes ago, we were talking about when Raila leaves.
Yeah.
And, Wanjiru, you're saying, this is a nice opening for Nyanza. But have they even started that process in terms of who's going to replace this enigma of an individual in politics in this country? But let me come to you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think there is a very huge gap which does exist between the top leadership as far as the senior citizens and the senior politicians is concerned. But now let us look at it from this perspective. Look at countries like Singapore. What did they do? They decided that we are going to work with the young people because I want to echo the words of the former First Lady, Her Excellency Margaret Kenyatta. In 2015, she said that the future of every great country that wants to be progressive is on the shoulders of the young people. And so what is our country doing with the young people? Do we have mentors in the society? Yes. But are they ready to mentor the young people? Young people are looking up to the senior citizens. But are they ready to exit so that they can allow the young people to actually ascend to political positions? That is a question for another day. But this is what I want to say, that the youth, we are not supposed to fear the future. And it is time for us to imagine that we are not here for politics to shape us. The youth must shape politics. And when we say we are shaping politics, it means we are trying to have ourselves and our voices heard. It is very paradoxical to be told that we are leaders of tomorrow when already we are qualified and we are ready for the top positions. Yeah. And this brings me to the ideology of democracy in political parties. How many chances can young people get in their bid for political positions? Yeah. It is a money-based issue today in this country that everything has been polarized, and it looks like whoever has huge amounts of money in their accounts finally wins it. So what about the ideology part of it? We are missing the point when we don't focus on ideologies, but we focus on the money part of our politics. And that has corroded our politics to the extremist ends. And I'm surprised that in the near future, this country is going to be, there is a gap that is going to exist if we are not so much careful and keen about the kind of leaders that we want to have in place. Today, in this country, we have very youthful politicians, the likes of what David said, that the likes of Ndindi Nyoro, the likes of Selassie. These are vibrant people, and they are doing so well, extremely well. And so what are we trying to say? That if more young people, it is on record. It is on record.
It's the second name there.
Yes.
I'm not sure. It is on record. It is on record. They are very youthful and they are doing so well, despite their, their own political, issues and social issues surrounding them. But they are doing so good.
Well,
so does it mean that if we give more, does it?
What are his parameters?
Let me bring in, and you're right about that whole gap. I want to kind of give you a stat. This is from the Ibrahim Foundation, where they said the median age of African leaders is 3 times the median age of the African population, right? So there you go in terms of statistics. It's not representative. Mohammed, let me bring you in here because, during the break we were talking about this supply chain, if you will, of young leaders. So starting them young, kind of inculcating this culture of wanting to be in active competitive politics, if you will. And we're seeing, establishments of youth parliaments and councils. It's great because you kind of build that appetite. Ruth was talking about universities also having a very vibrant political space and oftentimes producing some pretty formidable names in politics. But I wonder if those spaces or platforms further isolate the youth, almost kind of creating a kiddies table, right? And you're not mainstreamed into the main political space. You're not brought to the big people's table. And we don't see that translation many times from a youth politician to now mainstream. Where's the disconnect oftentimes in that?
One, I think the positions are relatively very few compared to the number of Kenyans. There are probably less than 10,000 elective posts in this country for a 50 million people. So if this group of people, if these youth parliamentarians will all transition to national parliament and the Senate and all of that, of course, there will be a huge disposition of those who currently occupy those positions. I beg to differ with my colleague on one thing, on this idea that there will be a gap. I do not think that there will ever be a gap. The thing about politics, or power rather, is that it's not given, it's not handed over to you. It will never happen. You have to take it and you have to grab it and all of these things. So if you experience all that history, let's say Moi ruled this country for 24 years. And when he was leaving, there wasn't this power vacuum in Kanu. He appointed his preferred successor. He didn't end up winning the election that time, former President Uhuru Kenyatta. But the people who were active in Youth for Kanu 92 and the people who ran his election then as young people are active today as the president and in other senior political positions. So I don't think there'll ever be that gap. There'll be people who will come up. There'll be a crop of those people who think they're good enough who will come up and who will transition into national politics. Secondly, I think the problem that we have is an identity or an individual political scenario. Why do we constantly need to ask the question, who will inherit the position of Raila Odinga? Why does it have to be a singular person inheriting the position of another singular person? It does not necessarily, because our politics is very, very singular in identity to individual people. That's why there's the constant talk of who is the Central Kenya kingpin, who is Rift Valley kingpin. And when this kingpin leaves office, there's that need to fill that one position. I do not think that necessarily works out for a lot of young people, that they need to fill these big shoes of these people. It's hard, and I also think that it is impossible for the kind of representation that we want. Thirdly, I think there's a lot of disconnect between young people and their active participation in politics, and they're thinking that politics hasn't given the results our parents desired. If our parents fought for this multi-party and they were actively voting in every election cycle, the economic situation hasn't improved that much. The political situation hasn't improved that much. The country's social fabric hasn't improved. We constantly vote along very tribalistic and very narrow-minded ideologies every election cycle. So if politics hasn't produced any results that our parents desired, why is there the belief that they will produce any result for us? Raila Odinga and a majority of these other people who currently occupy those positions have been actively on the forefront of our national newspapers easily for the past 30 or so years. So I think there's a lot of disconnect that politics hasn't produced results. Why bother with it? It will never do. Why bother with it?
So you have a very disillusioned young electorate, the ones who stayed away from the ballot last year, but one who actually dared to put themselves on the ballot, and the only one in this panel is Wanjiru. You know, we talked about party politics, the dynamics that play out there, especially if you're a young person. You saw this firsthand.
Yes, I did.
When vying, and during the break you talked about something that's very real for women aspirants, especially sexual harassment, and you and Ruth talked about sexual corruption. But, what was your experience like in this last election cycle?
So first I need to clarify that I really enjoyed the campaign process. And we need to clarify that, yes, politics is dirty, yes, politics is rough, but there is a part of politics that is really fun. Getting to interact with my people, getting to dance, which I love to do, because I transversed the whole of Nyeri County. I can tell you our strengths, I can tell you our weaknesses, I can tell you what my people are struggling with. And this is experience that I can never get from a classroom. So, and I would encourage young people, despite the hardships of politics, let us get in and do it. But without painting the rosy picture, I think I need to get real. I started my journey in Jubilee. And I was very confident that I would get the ticket because I was young and I had gone out and had done the work. And the party ticket was at some point in my name. Then somebody else paid money and the ticket went. But had also faced a fair share of sexual harassment. One of the parties, one of the people who had influence, because we didn't have nominations, it was a negotiated democracy, had already told me that my refusal to comply with what he wanted would be detrimental. So these are realities that we deal with. But and when I didn't get the ticket, I decided to go all the way to the end, and I'm proud of myself for doing that. I mean, I am genuinely very proud, and I'm happy that I got to do that because many young people loved my politics. I got so much support. I may not have won the seat because of the wave, but I got immense support, even from women. But of course, there is the issue of you're not married, you don't have children. She's very beautiful, she's going to steal our husbands. So that's,
Yeah, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
So it's a truth. And some of them would say, we are not going to vote for a child. We want to vote. But the minute I speak, the minute I share my vision, the minute I share the things that I have done, they would really appreciate that. But allow me to also say that a few weeks ago, I was invited to a youth launch, to a youth report launch. And one of the ladies, a student in one of the universities, said that a student leader representing their department last year came to her and he had these big ideas and she supported him, even going round and campaigning, but he didn't deliver anything after winning. So this year he came back to her and said, I want you to, I know I have your vote, but she did not, she had already decided that she wasn't going to vote for him, and that's not enough. She wasn't going to vote because this particular person that she trusted did not deliver on the promise. Right. Something happened in Kiambu a few days ago, and the deputy president really went at them, complaining, and whipped them, told them that if you're not happy with the leader, wait for 5 years and then vote them out. I think I'm very uncomfortable with that kind of thinking. Because when people agitate, when people speak out, when people express their dissatisfaction with the current leadership, that's their mandate. They ought to express their dissatisfaction with the leaders that they have elected. They need to hold them accountable for the 5 years that they've been given to serve. Similarly, this particular student leader ought to have agitated, ought to have gone to this person that she helped campaign and said, you promised to deliver A, B, C, and D. How far are we? Then show up either to vie and deliver better results than this person, or vote in somebody else and hold them accountable. So young people must A, register to vote, B, show up to vote, and C, stay on to guard their votes. Importantly, if they don't put you at the table, they put you on the table and eat you.
The menu. Yeah.
On the menu. It is time for us to start asking ourselves, is it time we created our own tables? I don't agree with Mohammed on the issue of having one leader, leading a region or leading a country. People even when you think about movements start with one person, and then the people who resonate, and then it becomes a movement, it's built. So people rally behind one person. And we need that young person to stand up and, and marshal all other young people, and we need to start at the grassroots. We need to go to the mashinani. I need to go back to my county in Nyeri and start mobilizing young people and, asking ourselves, 2027 is coming. We must not be on the menu, because the 50 shillings we are given, we sell our birthright for a plate of beans. And I think time has come for we as young people, we as young leaders who are seated here, to ask ourselves, is it time? And I believe it is time for us to convene for our selfish interests. So that even when the leaders are coming to negotiate with us, they are negotiating and we are saying, what are you giving to young people?
A quick one maybe before she takes over. I want to concur with her and also say that it is not about a glass of champagne for one person. Can we have water for all of us? Yeah, thank you. Maybe now you can.
Yes, go ahead.
I think I agree with on the issue of, she mentioned the issue of 50 shillings. And I'll unfortunately say that college politics at the moment are the breeding grounds for handouts in politics. When they introduced the delegate system, they messed up with politics which are policy-based in universities, right from universities. And we as the student leaders who come out of these universities go out there knowing very clearly, because I vied in a position in my college recently. And right now, one of the things you will ask me to prepare when I'm going out there to vie is to massively look for money. Because you realize if you do not have these
politics.
things, I've seen it, and it's from college politics. And if the situation is that way, at that level, then it is so unfortunate. The future is very, very, very worrying. Another issue that I like to delve into is the question of competence when it comes to young people. For us as young people to be taken seriously, we need to ensure that that is the case for the older generation. We need to have our issues together. We need to know how to articulate ourselves. We need to be in a position to handle responsibilities when given those responsibilities. Mwalimu Julius Nyerere rightfully said that you never succeed unless your successor succeeds. So the problem with the Kenyan situation is that the political class, the older political class, are not mentoring the young people. The young people look not so serious. No one is taking the young people seriously, because now they are saying the thing that we are good in, sitting with your laptop at Taptengele, as the president says, and and pressing here and there, and the dollar comes. They think that those are the things that make us happy, dancing before a ring light, to post it on TikTok. These people do not take us seriously, and it's unfortunate. And another issue which is very unfortunate is the fact that in Kenya currently, when you are a young person and you love politics and you love leadership, you tend to go backwards. It's so hard to find inspiration now. When we talk about the African leadership, when we talk about the Kenyan leadership, we will have names like Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara of Burkina Faso. We'll have names like Thomas Joseph Mboya of Kenya. So when we are forced to go back, then it's very saddening, we need to go back 60 years so that now we restart everything again, so that we catch up with the current situation.
Us,
yes. I think I'd like to just touch on something that she spoke about, an oversight. And it'll bring me to what Rotich was talking about. We recently saw when Senator Gloria was under fire on the floor of the Senate, we saw it becoming, a stereotyping issue where it is now all the young women were lumped into one. And I remember Senator Halwale specifically saying, I want to tell the young women in this Senate, I have a daughter who is more beautiful than... And in my head, I was like, okay, at what point did we move from the issue at hand to discussing your daughter? And the manner in which a lot of these other leaders came to the floor to basically just, disregard these young women who had made it to the floor of Senate, to just, talk them down. But if you look at some of these ladies, they have engaged on that floor more than some of these leaders. If you look at Senator Miraj, she has been speaking, she even has a bill, and she's a first timer. So when it comes to a young person they are judged almost twice or thrice as harsh as these other leaders. And then when that happens, it becomes, you see, we gave them an opportunity and this is what happens. Yeah. But nobody talks about the same thing when we have this, the older crop also make their own mistakes, because a human is a human is human. They're going to make mistakes at one point or the other. But on the role of oversight, which you spoke about, you've gone ahead, you've campaigned for this person, you've guarded, you vote, the person has gone in, and then you let them go. You don't go back and ask them, well, I voted you in because of these promises that you made, and you are yet to even fulfill one. Now, the issue we're having with that is that, one, after you've sold your vote, you almost do not have a right to go and ask the person. Because inside you strongly believe that the person is going to ask you, but you sold your vote to me, but I gave you money, and we finished our contract. But the other issue also is, do young people know, or do they have the comfortable channels to oversight? I have always said the current systems as they are do not work for this crop, this generation. This is because no one is going to wake up early. If we are finding it difficult to wake up early to go and queue in a bank, and that's why they've introduced online banking, where you're going to get money. What makes you think we're going to queue from 4 a.m. in the morning? Because the voting lines actually start at 4 a.m. in the morning to go and vote.
Why won't you?
That's why
why won't you?
That is the reasoning that is there. I was working for a political party in 2022, and I was in charge of a campaign region. And a lot of young people I would ask used to say, both in Nairobi and in the rural area, that is in Homa Bay, they used to want a less, they used to want a more comfortable voting procedure.
So
and a lot of them would ask me, why can't I vote on my phone the way I can access M-Pesa?
Wouldn't that be questioned as well?
And so if that is the feedback we are getting, I strongly believe it is time that we evolve, because this is a generation, he talked about TikTok, this is a generation that is digital. So if we are to get them to vote, we also need to incorporate their ideas as well. We cannot rule. This is a generation we can't rule with an iron fist. That this is how it's always been done, and this is how it must be done.
Okay, allow me to quickly jump in. Wanjiru, and then we'll come to.
I honestly have a problem with the entitlement that we have, and even the generations behind me have. And we also dissociate politics with our everyday life. We forget that the decision you make at the ballot, even deciding not to choose, is actually a choice that you have made. Is the reason we have poor leadership, is the reason we don't have jobs, is the reason we have corruption today. So you are an enabler. Right now, as it is, yes, I agree, we need digital voting, we need post office voting like in the US, but we don't have it. So you can't say, I'm not going to wake up to vote because there is no digital voting. Let us use what we have now, and then the leaders who go in, let us collaborate and work to ensure that there's digital voting. Secondly, he mentioned that we do not have good leaders who are admirable, and I agree with him, but we also need to appreciate that there is no perfect leader. Had there been social media during the Thomas Sankara era, we don't know what would have seen.
That's true.
Today social media exposes, and the fact that people have cameras everywhere they go on their phones exposes these leaders. I'm not justifying, and I think we need to hold our leaders accountable, but we also need to appreciate that our leaders are human, and they're not perfect. So we need to look at what is the good in this person, but while also criticizing the bad. We have excellent leaders. Like, I'm a young woman, I appreciate affirmative action because I have seen it nurture the likes of Mother Wangari, who is a member of parliament for Gilgit. I have seen it nurture Naisola Lesuda, who was the first female to be elected in Samburu. So I think the current governor of Embu is a product of affirmative action. She was mentored by the former governor of Kitui, Charity Kalukingilu. I mean, these are things that truly inspire me. I'm inspired by the Chief Justice, the current Chief Justice, who is an amazing woman. So, I mean, they are amazing leaders, and we must be very careful. If we look at the negatives, trust me, we'll never see the positive in these leaders. Finally, I think it's important that we invest in civic education, starting from primary schools. I have seen it done in the UK. We can do it here as well, and we need to be deliberate and intentional. I don't think this is going to be an initiative of the government. I think it has to be an initiative of us, the people. The last one, political parties. I vied on a party that wasn't popular in my region, and that was one of the greatest undoing, and probably the reason I didn't clinch the seat. I would also encourage young people to be wise. Which is a popular party in your region? Go in and muscle and then make the change. It might be difficult, as you know, because it's easier when you are in charge. But then I would also, because vying as an independent candidate is actually very, very expensive. It's extremely hard. I had 1,000 polling stations. That meant 1,000 agents. That meant 2,000 mobilizers. I mean, I don't have that kind of machinery, to be honest. I don't have the kind of resources. But if I was in a party, the party protects my votes. The party helped me campaign, so then the burden is not on me. If I was in UDA, for instance, I would be serving government in a different capacity. So I would encourage young people to also be wise.
Okay, and we're about to close the political part of this conversation. Wanyama, and then
yeah, maybe to pick on the same level, I think first and foremost, I want to differ a little bit on what she said. You see, when it comes to matters elections and voting, it is our constitutional right. And that is
duty.
And duty, yes. And that is the time for us to exercise our right. And you know, it doesn't matter how long I can queue.
It's 1 day and 5 years.
Yeah, it is a one-day activity. So there is no pleasure of saying that you want to be comfortable, you want this thing to be done the American way or what. In fact, what we are looking at right now is to reduce the cost of an election. As far as our country is concerned, in Africa, I think we are number 2. And in the world, we are top 10 in countries which have got, a very huge budget on their elections. And so for me, as a young person, I think it is just in order that I will queue the whole day to make the right decision because it matters, and that is what we lean on for 5 years or even for 10 years or even forever. And so I want to even emphasize on youth policies. The national youth policy, the East African youth policy, and even the UN youth policy. What are policies for? A good example is the county government of Uasin Gishu, for instance, where Governor Jonathan B. has put a segment of Vijana Ninguzo to Akuze. So what is it all about? Can we go back to the drawing board and see that we need to have policies that, if implemented, they can help the youth to move from one level to the other. And so that is a good example that Vijana Ninguzo, and that is to say that we have a role as the young people to play as far as the next leadership is concerned. So we cannot, shy away, and we cannot have the luxury of saying we are not going to be, there for all day. Let us avoid that aspect of being bossy, and because this is our country and the future of this country is on our shoulders. So it is up to us to take the mantle with the seriousness that is required to move to the next level. Yeah, thank you.
Mohammed?
Wanjiru asks the question, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you go through the suffering of that 1 day of voting, and why wouldn't you participate? So I'll tell you why I won't, probably. Not for the fear of sounding pessimistic, but why a majority of young people won't. So you might think of it as 1 day of suffering, or at least 1 day of trouble, and then 5 years of better leadership and all of those things. This country got multi-party democracy in 1992. Since then, there has been no single election which has not been contested. So it is not only 1 day of suffering, it's a follow-up of 5 years of suffering. So why do I put myself for this 1 day? To get results which have not been favorable to any of the citizens for all of the past election cycles. So in the recent 2022 election, there is this huge campaign of dynasty versus hustlers and all of these things. And a lot of young people resonate with that we're really not part, that the economy is not working for us. There are a lot of vested interest in all of these things. They turn up and they rally behind a candidate. The candidate gets into power. And what is it now? Even if we went through the trouble of that 1 day on the 8th of August of 2022, what we're facing is an immediate 1 year of constant suffering. Higher tax measures, schools haven't been funded, teachers, there are not enough teachers. Every little headline is one of suffering. So I think they won't take that burden because elections haven't delivered the results that they hope they will deliver. They haven't delivered less corruption. They haven't delivered better equipped hospital. They haven't delivered a better education system. They haven't delivered a better political atmosphere. But regardless, is that an enough reason to not go out and vote? Of course not. Of course not. The higher likelihood that you will have a result that will improve the situation in this country through the ballot there's a higher likelihood of that happening than a likelihood of you sitting in your bedroom and tweeting and things changing. There's a higher likelihood that you could have a change at the ballot. Yeah. That hasn't been the case, but still it is our responsibility and our duty to turn out and vote and do all of this.
We have to before you close, my two colleagues were talking about an ideal situation. Yes, I should vote. I must vote. It's my constitutional right. It's my constitutional duty. But the young people are telling you it's not working for me. So are we going to continue forcing them with something that's not working? Right now, public participation, which is one of the biggest oversight tools we have, has gone digital. We have an application that will tell you there's a public participation happening in this and this area on this and this date. You've got an application that tells you these are the bills that are being discussed in your county. All those things are accessible on your phone. So why shouldn't voting be accessible on your phone? In as much as it is, should we be then comfortable?
Public participation, though?
Yes, a lot of them engage in that public participation. In fact, ever since Nairobi started having, including that religiously on that particular app, they have recorded the highest number of young people that are actually participating in oversight. And because of that, we are seeing a lot of young members of county assemblies equally using that app to just say that this is what I am actually doing also in county assembly, because they are amongst the people who are judged harshly. And you can always see the feedback, where young people are also saying that, but me, I don't understand what this is. This one doesn't resonate with me. You see that engagement. So now it's just to go a step further and say, how do we localize these bills that are being passed? How do we localize the discussion? How do we break it down to, a language that they understand? Just because these channels are not available does not mean that we should be comfortable with it.
Can I surprise you?
I think we need to.
It's actually created by a young person.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And that tells you that this young person was proactive.
Exactly.
And created the solution. Can we also create a solution for voting and go to IEBC and say, I've created this solution for voting digitally instead of demanding it? And then, Mohammed, rigging happens at the polling station. Whenever it happens, it doesn't happen at the top. It's at the polling station. So why I said you must stay on to guard your vote is because when you're there, you're able to see Wanjohi had vied, how many votes has Wanjohi gotten, and it has not gone to somebody called Mudhoni instead of Wanjohi. So when we show up to vote, when we register, show up to vote and then stay on to guard our votes, trust me, nobody will rig you out.
That is the hope. But, in this country...
That is the hope, yes.
No, but let's do our bit.
Things happen. No, absolutely, absolutely. And I have to go back to something that Mohammed had talked about, which is critical results. Right? So we vote these people in. If it's contested, we go through the process. The courts make their pronouncement, and life continues. And life has been pretty hard, as he said, in the last year under this regime. And one of the biggest promises that we see, not just with this Kenya Kwanza regime, previous ones, is jobs, right? We'll create jobs. Unemployment has been a huge burden for the youth population. When you're looking at priorities, 18 to 35, they say we want jobs. That's one of the policy priorities they want the government to focus on. And we've seen institutions like African Union having the 1 million by 2021 initiative. 2021 is long gone. Where they had, very ambitious goals to provide opportunities for at least 1 million Africans when it came to employment, entrepreneurship, education, engagement. And that's the thing. I think we get disillusioned when you see these targets come and go. And we're in the same position, if you will. What is the issue when it comes to creating jobs for youth? We've heard the president, even as early as yesterday, talking about affordable housing, creating more jobs. That is going to be the sure way. And people are asking, but what kind of jobs will affordable housing actually create? Let me come to you, Ruth. When it comes to unemployment, what do you think is the biggest problem when it comes to actually delivering on that promise?
Allow me to start by something you've mentioned about the AU and these targets that come and go. Right now, the AU, we've got the AU 2063 agenda. But what is happening is that when the UN SDG 2030 came, we all shifted focus. All African countries forgot about their own 2063 agenda and started focusing on the UN SDG 2030. In the, in the various countries, and I'll specifically pick the countries in Europe. In schools, right from kindergarten, you find them having the UN SDG 2030 conversation. You'll go to a kindergarten class and they have them on the charts. Right here, I can assure you, if I talk to, I won't even talk about the kindergarten or the primary students. Let's even talk about the high school students. How many of them have even heard about the AU 2063 agenda? So we've got these targets that are very elitist, and the conversation remains at a particular level. So even the citizens that are supposed to own it and are supposed to contribute towards it can do very little because they do not know about it. They've not been engaged on this discussion. When it comes to the affordable housing and the various jobs that are there, or the various jobs that seem to be there, we had the very famous quote where we were told, you know, the plumbers and whatnot from the TVETs are going to be the ones that are working in affordable housing. But the challenge that has been given time and time again is, even if I ask the number of us here on this panel, and I ask us, do you know someone who has been a plumber in affordable housing? The answer is most likely to be no. So where are these people going? Is it just a discussion for the sake of being popular? Is it just, it's a very populist discussion? We have this new transition from the TVETs and, in line with the new curriculum. But we still have an issue where a number of them don't have certificates. So we've got a lot that is graduating, but they cannot even go ahead because they do not have the certificates. So I think one of the issues that we have when it comes to unemployment is that when those statements are made, they don't mean them. They are made because they're very popular and it's a very enticing statement on the campaign trail. But two, we've got the education system that we've just finished clearing out was not preparing people to be, self-employed or to use their skills. It was preparing you to, you always had a target that you were setting. So I need to pass KCPE so that I get a good high school. I need to pass KCSE so that I get into a good university. I need to, get a good grade so that I get a job. It was never, I've got this skill, and so as I'm getting into high school, my skill is being honed through this particular subject. So that then when I get to the university, I am maximizing on this skill that I have already started. If I do decide to change, my skill that I want to focus on, or to change my career path at the university level, I already have a skill that I can rely on. So I think with this new curriculum, I am hoping that that's some of the things that it will address. However, I am seeing a lot of the CBC homework, for example, being done by the parents. So the young people are also just, getting to learn quite a little bit of what they're supposed to be. But I strongly believe our curriculum was one of the biggest issues. It did not teach us to go and be self-employed. It didn't teach us to maximize on our skills. But also, finally, agriculture was one of the best employing, it really gave a lot of jobs previously. But right now, especially amongst the young people, the notion on agriculture is really changing. You feel a lot of people, I've had conversations with young people on, technology and agriculture, and they'll tell you, isn't it to Ushago? Whereas and they'll even ask me, I stay in an apartment, Ruth, where do you expect me to farm? Those are some of the questions. So it goes to tell you that there's a lot they don't know about agriculture. There's still a lot that needs to be done when it comes to just sensitization on some of these jobs. We really need to change the perception of what employment looks like in our country.
No, absolutely. And I know that has been a concern in terms of glamorizing agriculture and farming. I think it was Edwin Odhiambo it was a conference, and he said, how can we make a farm swag, if you will, appealing to the young people? But before you contribute, Eric, just to your point, Ruth, about where are these jobs when it comes to affordable housing, the president has given some numbers yesterday. So beyond the 300,000 jobs he said would be created for youth, he said so far they've created 130,000. So young people working in various jobs in the affordable housing. And in the project that he was launching yesterday in Muranga, he said 1,600 jobs. So again, I guess it's upon us in the media to monitor and see whether this actually is the case. But yeah, to you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe to add on that, what she has said, is that today we have so many young professionals in different fields, and the rate of unemployment is alarming. We have people age category of 40 to 45. They are the leading in government positions and in terms of employment. So what is it that I'm trying to say? For the case of maybe Uasin Gishu County, where we have a youth policy that talks about the youth incubation centers. So can we have a national incubation center whereby the government has got data and the information of the people who are qualified, trained for every specific job, so that we narrow down the division of labor and specialization, so that we just place people where they can do best. So maybe what I'll say is, can we have the Ministry of Labor doing the same, so that we can have an incubation center for the government, so that when it comes to the issues of now, the way she said, the plumbing sector, the government knows who are these people in this sector, so that by the end of the day, we don't even misappropriate again the jobs that are available to the people who are not qualified for the job. So if we can have a charter, or rather a policy and an act that addresses the incubation centers and the number of people who are trained for a specific job, it will be easy for the counties even to absorb, the way maybe for the case of Uasin Gishu County is doing under the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports.
Oftentimes the argument you hear from, if it's political leaders, policymakers, when it comes to solving this unemployment issue is, look, if you can't find a job, start one, create jobs, become an entrepreneur. And, for a lot of young people, they're saying, well, I'm trying to, but the environment is not conducive enough. Yeah, we have these affirmative action funds that are directed towards them, but they'll say those aren't as helpful in terms of scaling my business. But, you wanted to say something. No, actually, Mohammed, before I come to David, in terms of entrepreneurship and starting a business.
Yes, I think it might sound too far-fetched, but I strongly also think that the solution lies therein. It lies in the private sector. I dislike big government. I dislike government having a lot of affairs in our daily lives, overreaching into our pockets and collecting more taxes and all of those things. And the way to really do that, I think, is to reduce government's involvement in a lot of these sectors as much as possible, to privatize whatever is possible as much. So I think part of what is failing or ailing that, one, is cheap credit. If the government, in 2 days Eurobond, the government borrowed at almost 10%. That is at 9.785%. In the local economy, the government is borrowing at a 17%. They're giving out treasury bonds at 17, 18%, 5-year treasury bonds. So I think that crowds out a lot of private enterprises from accessing cheap credit. And if we could get the government to reduce its borrowing within the local economy, I think that frees up a lot of finances and resources to be able to be given to private sector. And I think that spurs a lot of economies. Secondly, I think we have a big problem with the ease of doing business. Carry today is a threat to everybody. You're scared at the idea of carry. They're harassing passengers at the airport. They've sent out paramilitary trained carry agents to come in. And you wonder, are you tax collectors, or are you to come into businesses to collect all of this data? I think that creates a lot of fear within the private sector. It is not good for business, and all of those are policies. Secondly, Victoria, I'm a supporter of the affordable housing project or bill and everything that comes with it. I have a bit of reservations. People ask genuine questions that if you're selling 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom units at 3 million and you want local everyday Kenyans to raise 10% of that, how realistic is that? I genuinely understand those reservations. However, I think it has the ability to create mass jobs. Those numbers which the president is talking about, of course, need to be verified. However, I think there's a high likelihood that if you're building over a 5-acre plot, there is the high likelihood that you will create hundreds of jobs. Of course, you could ask again the question, what quality of jobs and all of those things. But for an economy that is growing, and the need to give and put money in people's pockets, I don't think it really matters what kind of jobs in this situation. Construction, agriculture has the ability to create mass jobs. If the local person who did not have a job yesterday is now working in a construction site and is getting 500 shillings, it's better for him, it's better for his family, it's better for the economy, because now they have a better spending power. So I think it has the ability to create a lot of mass jobs within a very short period of time, something that the economy hasn't been doing that well. Of course, that translates again to a lot of other industries. More steel will be bought. If more steel will be bought, more steel mills need to be set up. More people work in those steel mills. Cement, blocks, everything that goes into that. There is a lot of whatever that is happening in this affordable housing that is specifically reserved for those in the Juakali industry. The welding, the doors and all of those things. I think such government spending on a wide scale has the ability to create mass jobs. It has the ability to spur the economy. I'm in support of it.
Another thing we've seen the government do is also, sign bilateral agreements with other governments to create jobs abroad. Right? We saw recently farming jobs in Israel. We've seen nursing jobs. But the problem is a lot of people say brain drain. We're not retaining this very critical talent on the ground. But the question is also, can we absorb that talent here?
Yeah.
But, what are your thoughts when it comes to just what the government is trying to do? Do they need to scale it? Is it working?
I think time will tell whether it's working, but I wouldn't complain much about brain drain. What we need is a mechanism of ensuring that these brains that are brought back, and the skills they'll have acquired can be brought back and impact our country. Can we say after 5 years, after 10 years, is there that arrangement to ensure that they come back home? But I think the issue of job creation is a challenging one. And I wouldn't even put it on government. I wouldn't even really blame the government, because many countries across the continent and the globe are also grappling with this. If you watched the World Economic Forum that happened in January, we're in the fourth industrial revolution. We're talking about AI. We're talking about robotics. What's a place for Kenya? And I think a country that has done very well is India and China, that all these Western countries are able to export these countries, China and India, are able to export their services. They're also able to export maybe the phone chips and many other things. So the question is, where is Kenya in all this? How are we preparing ourselves? Besides looking for jobs outside, are we saying we have resources? I mean, Kenyans are absolutely brilliant, and I constantly say this. Look at academic writing, for instance. It's mostly done by Kenyans. So that tells you, when the chat GPT was starting, it came to Kenya to help them sort out. And of course, there is a whole case around it because of the abuse that they went through. But to sort out, for instance, pornographic material, they came to Kenya for that. So I think we can negotiate that we are able to export skills. We can be a call center. Our English is very, very good. So these are opportunities that we can negotiate. I'm happy that we have CBC, but does it have the future? Are we looking at the future? We have Vision 2030. Are we producing skills? Have we done skill set mapping to see in 2030 what are the skills that we as a country will require? So that we also look at what are we training right from primary school through to universities. So that skill set mapping is required. Private sector, what do they need? Because at times I'm an employer, I'm an entrepreneur. At times I get people from the university and they can't even type a complete email. And I'm like, my goodness, this one went through school. She did PR, for instance, or he did PR, but they can't write a constructive sentence. What does the industry need?
Job readiness.
Job readiness, for instance. Finally, it's unfortunate that our politics is not a politics of ideology. The bottom-up economic model, what does it mean? I remember a member of parliament coming to Citizen and being asked, what do you mean by bottom-up? And they could not explain it. So we have euphoria. it's unfortunate that 2027 campaigns have already started, and the numbers that are being thrown left, right, and center are to influence 2027. But we need to hold our leaders accountable, and I challenge the media to also start asking very, very tough questions when these leaders come into studio, when you get a chance to interview them. Please hold them accountable. Let them tell us exactly how are these 130 jobs being created by affordable housing. And we need to stop looking at this from a linear point of view. There is a lot more that we can do. The EU, for instance, signed an agreement with Kenya. They require coffee, and we're not even meeting the targets because our quality of coffee is really not good. Our bushes are not producing as much as, for instance, Mexico. We have excellent coffee, but we're not producing as much. These are conversations that we need to start having. We need to start manufacturing, for instance, our own coffee. And Udaya, there's Udaya Coffee now. They've started producing their own. Dedan Kimathi coffee is amazing. They've started producing their own coffee. There is another person who had vied for governor called Duo Madenge. I always stop at his shop to take his coffee. So these are things that are happening, but we need to scale up. And we need to come together and look at ourselves as a country and see what are we good at. And what can we export? When you look at the East African community, for instance, we don't have to compete with the Ugandan egg because it comes all the way from Uganda by road and it's cheaper than the Kiambu egg. Why? Because of taxation of our farm inputs, for instance. But we don't have to compete with them on that. What are we producing that they don't produce? Can we sell them that, for instance? Beef. What can we sell them? Skills. I went to Java in Rwanda and I had a conversation with Margie and they said, these people, it was a couple of years ago, and they said, they take afternoon naps. But Kenyans don't take afternoon naps. We work. We are workers. And of course, there are people who will disagree with me and say that is abuse. But we work. And that's our strength. Why not export these skills to other countries as well?
Yeah. No, certainly.
I think
so. David, and then we'll come to Eric, and then we'll come to David.
Oh yeah, a quick one on the issue of employment.
Yeah,
yeah. Our president has been visiting so many countries abroad, and I think that is a plus for him. It is good to be honest that the kind of jobs that we are trying to look at from an international market are going to help so much. But let us come back to our own country. In terms of business, as you said, employment is not just about being in an office, but have we been empowered as young people to do business? Countries like Belgium, Singapore, China, France, the president has been there. Why can't he even borrow such policies like tax holiday? There is tax holiday for the youth. You are a young person, you want to start a business. Someone comes from a very marginalized area. A family cannot be in a position even to raise 10,000 shillings. A family of 10 people, they cannot raise 10,000 shillings a whole month. And now they have to start a business. A family member starts a business, and that is a young person in that business with an aim of transforming that family. And so the issue of licensing and KRA is there now, the way my brother Mohammed said. So can we have tax holiday for the youth, that you start a business and it takes you like 4 to 6 months so that you can have the license, and you raise money from the business so that you can now pay for the license and all other compliances, instead of you're looking for a capital startup of 150,000 maybe for liquor business, for instance, then the license is 100,000 shillings. Now, how do you go about it? Can the government allow the young people to work so that after the 6 months or specified duration, now they come and say, hey, you've been working for 6 months. Now, have you complied? It's time for you to comply. Then, like the way she did put it so clearly, Kenya is a very active political country on earth. It is only in this country whereby someone is elected to there, and by the time they're being sworn in, they also declare on the same day that asanteni sana kwa kunichagua, si tunatembea pamoja miaka 10. So there is no room for work. So if there is no room for work and everything is politically centralized, then it is even difficult to invest in the future.
Let's wrap up with David. We're running out of time.
Can I just after him?
The problem with Africa and even Kenya is the problem of governance. We do not have political goodwill to create jobs intentionally. We have affordable housing, but there are a lot of legal questions underpinning that project in itself. That is public land. Who will own that land? You cannot sell public land. If you sell me the building, then what happens with the ownership of the land? That notwithstanding, we have a problem of systems in Kenya that says that we do not focus on the systems, having systems in place that actually work. We depend on who occupies that office. If we had systems which actually work, it would not matter who occupies the offices that we have in the country. So the problem is that of systems that do not work, political goodwill, and corruption ultimately, because the issue of corruption is catastrophic in the nation. So when we deal with that issue, we have systems that are in place. It won't matter who will be the president, because we have systems which work. They will be perfecting the nitty-gritties which are within the systems which actually work. Thank you.
Ruth,
I just wanted to react on something that Wanjiru said very quickly. Two things. Yes, there's a time that Kenya was applauded as being one of the largest labor markets. But what we've seen happening is we've got a lot of young ladies going to the UAE, but we always have these stories of either someone being mistreated, someone getting stuck. So I think that's an area we need to tighten and just see, in as much as we're exporting our labor, how do we also safeguard those that are going? There's also been the conversation about our students, or rather our young people, going to Germany, going to France, and all these other nations. But I think the gap for me is that they first need to learn that language, and learning that language is not cheap. How many Kenyans are able to afford just the very basic certificate to be able to learn this language? So even as we're negotiating some of these policies and some of these agreements, we need to also look at a possibility of them learning the language as they work. We need to try and get, because I don't see Kenya insisting on you learning Swahili, for example, before coming to work here as you're registering for your license. So I think those are some of the agreements. We need to selfishly guard our skill set that is going out of the country. And as they come back in, I think rightfully, as Wanjiru said, we need to also look at opportunities for absorbing them back. Because a lot of what happens is once they have worked abroad, what they do is they send this money to relatives or friends or partners, expecting them to make investments. But what happens when you've been sending money for 3, 4, 5 years, your contract is over, you've come back, the person is nowhere to be seen. You have to start afresh. And a lot of times people ask you, you've been away for 5 years, what have you been doing? Yes, I know you've been outside the country. So we need a mechanism of absorbing them once they come back home.
Okay, we have to leave it there because we've run out of time completely.
Quickly, let me say something.
10 seconds.
Yeah,
30.
I think we need to declare mental health as a national disaster, so that we can have resources allocated to it. And to young people and everybody who's watching me, life is hard, but choose life.
Great point, great place to leave it. Let's take a look at feedback really quickly. Where is it being projected? There we are. Okay, so this coming in on X. Chalo saying President only creates jobs whenever he sees a crowd standing before him, and in reality there are no such jobs. If you don't come up and create jobs, they will find it rough coping with Kenya's economy at the moment. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Paul saying that Lady Ruth Bolo is raising very important issues and proposing good solutions in regards to the current generation. She's very conversant. So lovely to listen to her.
Thank you.
Wonderful compliment there. Liki Ochola saying, voter apathy has no justification and young people must cede the casualness and entitlement. A vote not cast is an approval for all that is wrong with our nation. There will be no laws tailored to suit laziness. We must vote.
Yeah.
Right. Babu Michael saying, for youth inclusion matters to be taken beyond the rhetoric, they themselves must take their issues beyond the rhetoric? Yeah, I think so. Politicians always promise and don't deliver, but no one tends to ask them those serious questions. Empty rhetoric. Okay? All right. Thank you so much for your feedback and watching and engaging as well. We are done with Daybreak this Friday. Have a lovely weekend ahead. I'm Victoria Rubadiri. Stay tuned. Much more ahead. Bye for now.